1,000 songs. And it goes right in my pocket.
Failure of the future has to be a nation that is agile, that is innovative, that is creative.
Welcome to Future Squared, the podcast all about innovation in the enterprise, brought to you and run by Collective Campus, an innovation hub based in Australia that works with companies to help them adopt the mindset, methodologies and tools to successfully explore new business models and disruptive innovation in an era of rapid change. For more information, go to www.collectivecamp.us. And without further ado, here's today's podcast. Welcome back to Future Squared, innovators. I'm super excited to be introducing today's guest, Mr. Ted Rubin. He's a leading social marketing strategist, keynote speaker, and brand evangelist. He evangelized the term ROI, which is short for return on relationship, a concept he believes is the cornerstone for building an engaged, multi-million member database, many of whom are vocal advocates for the brand. Ted is the most followed CMO on Twitter and has released a number of books, including Return on Relationship and How to Look People in the Eye Digitally. Ted has a deep online background, beginning in 1997, working with best-selling author, entrepreneur, and agent of change Seth Godin at Yoyodyne, which was acquired in 1998 by Yahoo. His personal motto is, "Life is not about waiting for the storm to pass, it's about learning to dance in the rain." And so with that, it gives me absolute pleasure to introduce the one, the only, Ted Rubin. Welcome to the show, Ted.
Thanks for having me here, Steve. I'm excited to be talking and imagining myself back in Australia. I mean, I haven't been to Melbourne. I've been to Sydney, but I'm looking forward to coming back. It was one of my favorite trips.
Well, you lost me at you haven't been to Melbourne, but you've been to Sydney. You just can't say that to a Melbourne boy.
Well, get me a speaking gig in Melbourne, and I'll be there.
Okay, challenge accepted. Well, I've been to your neck of the woods. I know you're a New York native.
That's correct. I grew up in Long Island. I lived in New York City for 10 years after college, and I still keep a home in Long Island, but my plan is to get the hell out of New York as soon as I can.
Yeah.
I'm ready to relocate. I'm done with New York. I've had enough.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. It is. I always say places like that. I absolutely love visiting New York. I think it's an amazing place. It's got something for everyone. But it is such a, there's just so much hustle and bustle that it requires a certain type of persona to really put up with that in the long term.
No, there's no doubt. And more than that, and this might be the old guy in me coming out. Mm-hmm. It used to be better, but it certainly has gotten louder and more crowded and less personal, and people are staring at the devices, and it's just there's so much traffic. You have to walk down the street the way you drive on a crowded highway. Mm-hmm. You have to plan 3 cars ahead, if you walk faster or drive faster than the next guy. Mm-hmm. And you've got to figure a way around. And then you've got to try to talk to people over the horns blaring and the sirens going off. So, I'll tell you right now, I spent time in Dublin. Mm-hmm. I loved it. London is another very crowded city, but I find it much more livable than New York.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And I also know you're quite an avid skier. Did you manage to get away from the hustle and bustle and hit the slopes this past winter?
Well, I did, and that's also changing a little bit for me too, because I find that I just don't like the cold anymore.
Right.
And I love to ski, and if I could transport myself, if I could wake up in the morning and Steve calls me and says, "Dude, it's going to be it's going to be spring skiing today, 60 degrees." If I could press a button, like it was Star Trek, or click my heels together like the Wizard of Oz, and be on the mountain, I would be there. But I was there this December, and it was so cold. And I was just I've had enough of this stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
I want to be out in the ocean. I want to be out in the sun. Mm-hmm. I want to learn how to kiteboard. That's what I want to learn how to do. That's my goal.
Well, look, we've got lots of kiteboarding down here in Melbourne, so I'll set up that talking gig, and you'll come out here and we'll do some kiteboarding.
Sounds like a plan. I have to tell you that a group over in Europe a few years ago was planning this event, and they wanted to make it experiential, so they were going to do it in Morocco, and everybody was going to, all the speakers were going to go through this training of learning how to kiteboard. And I'm like, unfortunately, the event got canceled. I think they were trying to be a little too experiential, and they weren't getting enough people coming. But I'm like, now there's an event I want to speak at.
Yeah, definitely. Anyway, we are digressing from today's topic of conversation. I'm sure we could talk about kiteboarding and the cities of the world for a little while, but let's get into it. Keen to talk to you today about return on relationship. In this climate of rapid change and uncertainty, delivering an exceptional and memorable customer experience can be the difference between success and failure in many cases. Why is customer experience so important today, Ted? And compared specifically to how important it was perhaps 10 years ago?
Well, I think it's becoming more and more important because of the way we share our experiences, because of our ability to interact and engage with the people delivering those experiences, and for what our expectations have become. So, in a way, though, what I find is happening is that commerce is coming full circle. A customer experience was a very important thing years ago. I mean, in some cases, it wasn't as much because there was only one vendor, but also that guy, he knew your family, he saw you every day. I like to say, treat everyone like you're going to see them tomorrow. And there was a time where the person you're doing business with would see you every day. And what's happened now is that every experience we have, we're capable of sharing. And we're capable of sharing in so many different ways. We're capable of sharing face-to-face. We're capable of sharing on platforms. And the people we're sharing with are also capable of sharing what we've shared with them. So, it's just become more and more important. And it's why, I talk a lot about return on relationship, which just to give a basic description for your audience, I like to say that simply put, it's the value that's accrued by a person or a brand due to nurturing a relationship. Return on investment, ROI, is simple dollars and cents. But return on relationship is the value, both perceived and real, that will accrue over time through connection, trust, loyalty, recommendations, and sharing. And if you think about that, in today's day and age, sharing is becoming easier and easier. And people are doing it, en masse. I mean, when you look at, people like to say, and I've heard this all the time from parents, oh, our kids, they're not social, they're on their devices all the time. But actually, they're way more social than we ever were, because they're connecting with such a vast amount of people simultaneously at once. I mean, there's not a kid out there that isn't on text chats with 5, 10, 15, 20 friends.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
My daughter's in college now, both of my daughters, but my younger daughter happens to be very social. And, when we were in college, or, I'm a lot older than you are, but especially when I was in college, and I'm sure when you were, you had to alert your friends to where you were going. They didn't just know. Now, everybody knows where you're gathering. With one click of a button, people know what bar you're going to, where you're hanging out, or where you are that very moment.
Yeah, definitely. And, you touched on a few interesting points there. I mean, I've probably got about 5 WhatsApp groups with a total of about 27 people across them that we're constantly chatting to each other. But, sharing is so easy these days. And it's actually gotten to a point where if you send someone a link and say, hey, you share this link, they won't do it. You've got to make it really easy for them, to the point where people are so used to just clicking a button to share something on Twitter. Anything more than that, and people probably were like, oh, this is too much work. So it's just become so easy. But people are likely to share the bad as well as they are to share the good, which means that companies are now at a point where they have to maintain a particular presence on, social media. So keen to talk to you about the ROI of social media. It's something that a lot of people, marketing at large companies, corporate executives, etc., will ask the question, well, what's the point? What's the ROI of social media? We can't really tie this to dollars and cents, but I imagine you have a different opinion on that.
Well, first of all, I think a lot of it depends on how you measure ROI, because, ROI isn't always measured the same way. And so many look at it, they want to understand direct click to sale.
Yeah.
And that's just not the way it's going to happen all the time. There is so much ROI that is measurable in social. It's a matter of how you look at it. I mean, first of all, let's understand something. Everybody prefers to do business with someone they like versus someone they don't. I mean, this is just, human nature.
Yeah.
And it's common sense. And many people tend to overlook that because for a long time, things had moved to the mass merchandising. People would shop where it was cheapest. And yes, to a degree, price is important. But overall, people are looking for a good experience. I mean, I would venture to say that a vast majority of the people that shop on Amazon don't shop there just for the prices. They can buy stuff cheaper.
Yeah.
They buy it from Amazon because of the experience, because of the value of their time, because of how easy Amazon makes it. I mean, just a perfect example. I just ordered something. It wasn't what I thought it would be. So I wanted to return it. All I do is click on a link at Amazon and they send someone to my door to pick it up. I don't even have to print out a label. And then, it used to take weeks before you'd see your credit on your credit card. Within hours of the pickup, Amazon is getting a confirmation from the pickup company that they picked it up, and I already have a credit on my credit card. So when you think about that, and what happens with those kind of things, it just shows you, how the experience is important and where the ROI really is. But there are other ways to do this. ROI can be measured in the amount of people talking about you. ROI can be measured in share of voice. I mean, a company that really understands their audience and has done their research properly, they know over the course of time that if their share of voice increases, they know exactly what percentage their sales will increase by.
That's right.
Therefore, all they have to do is the math. If we put this much time and effort into getting our voice out in social media, how does it affect our share of voice? How does it affect our net promoter score, the ability or the likelihood of a customer to recommend you to somebody else?
That's right.
How does it affect the recommendations that we're getting on sales sites or on places like Yelp? And you can build a correlation between those kinds of things and your sales and your revenues and your profitability.
That's right.
So it really, a lot of times when I'm with a company that's selling a product or doing some work for a major brand and they push hard to know, for me to tell them what the ROI is, I'm not afraid to look them in the eye and say, no. You tell me what the ROI is. You have a $30 million, $100 million marketing budget. Why aren't you spending $100,000 to figure out how these things affect your sales? Why are you coming to me for that? Because truth be told, I'm certainly going to try to steer it to make it look better for me. Why aren't you figuring that out?
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting you say that. It's not purely about acquisition or using social media to acquire customers. It's about having that ongoing conversation. It's about referral. It's about retention. It's an ongoing thing. It's not enough simply to acquire the customer and put up, sponsored tweets, which I think nobody really likes, where you're basically screaming marketing messages from the treetops, which is basically, I think, what a lot of organizations are doing, not just in the marketing space, but in the innovation space, taking old processes and just digitizing them and thinking that, hey, we can take a marketing campaign that we ran 2 years ago on television and just, say the exact same thing via a tweet, and that's all we need to do.
No, there's no doubt. And look, especially back when everything first started, people were just taking catalogs, putting them online and calling that e-commerce. Yeah. But now it's like when I hear people say, it's really important for businesses to pay attention to mobile. No, it's not just important. It's absolutely critical because the word mobile is going to disappear pretty soon because everything is mobile. Yeah. There's going to be nothing that isn't mobile. My laptop right now is basically mobile.
That's right.
I mean, I have an 11-inch Mac Air. I mean, I walk around with it in my hand. I take it with me everywhere. I mean, I might not be walking down the street with it like I might with my handheld, but anytime I need it, I open it. So I think that companies have to start understanding that people they want information when they want it. They want a good customer experience, but most importantly, what a good customer experience means is they want communication. They want to be able to hear from people. Too many brands think that the only thing good customer experience means is the best product or the best experience or solving their problems. But very often, just like in personal relationships, I mean, we're guys, and although we have a very hard time delivering this to our girlfriends or wives, we do know deep down that if we would just listen to them, they'd probably be a lot happier with us than they are. Now, it's hard for us to do that in our personal lives, but there's absolutely no excuse to not do it from a business perspective.
That's exactly right. And I think it would be a part of a bigger cultural thing. Like, for example, I know most startups that I work with, they tend to be relentless when it comes to satisfying their customers. They may have certain customers who will write nasty emails and say, hey, I haven't received this product, or I received this product and, it was broken or whatnot. And they will say, look, that's fine. Look, our apologies, we will send you a new one, or we will give you a money back guarantee, and probably throw something in on top of that. And it just seems to be something that comes ground up with many startups these days. Whereas some of the more traditional organizations who in the past perhaps, may be part of a monopoly or an oligopoly and just had all the control, are now entering an age where the consumer has all the control and perhaps are trying to play catch up, and sort of the cultural I suppose sticky points in that organization don't really support changing to this new way of thinking.
No, and then, look, technology is getting stronger. Being able to give credit where credit is due is becoming easier with certain applications and platforms. So a lot of this stuff will become trackable. But even now, two very important points that I believe are incredibly affected by return on relationship and by social media are cost mitigation and sales increase. So, with regard to cost mitigation, it's important to look at success as generating more impressions than traditional media might have done for the same media spend. I remember we're still buying traditional media. We're still buying what we call traditional digital, which are banners and buttons. And there's millions, hundreds of millions of dollars being spent on this. Now, if you can generate the same impressions for significantly less money, which most often is the case, with social media, then you're getting a direct referenceable return on investment. It's purely cost per thousand or a CPM play. Yeah. And it's great for consumer packaged good brands that have a large marketing budget and view social as simply one part of their communication plan. And it can also work for brands that see the importance of brand awareness, because you can incredibly build brand awareness using social media tools. And then if you go to the sales increase side, a valuable method of defining ROI of social is measuring annualized customer value. Right. I mean, typically a customer who regularly absorbs content that references a brand is more valuable customer than a non-fan follower or subscriber. And this is classic return on relationship. They may spend more, average order value, visit more often and make more purchases, frequency of purchase, or remain a loyal customer for a longer period of time, lifetime value of a customer. Or very often all three. And these are metrics that every senior executive, every person in the C-suite, every CEO and every CFO understands. They all understand average order value, frequency of purchase, and lifetime value of a customer. And these are all things that can be affected every single day by building relationships with social media.
So it definitely comes down to speaking the same language as the C-suite. And
and understanding what they understand and what's important to them. The word advocacy means nothing to them if you don't explain what advocacy means.
Well, that makes perfect sense. And, you've touched on, the best kinds of customers are the customers that come back, spend more, and tell their friends about the product. Which I draw parallels between that and Dave McClure's startup metrics for Pirates funnel, which is acquisition, activation, revenue, retention, referral. It's not just about acquisition, it's about the entire funnel, and the best kinds of customers will come back and they'll also refer their friends, and that's really what you want. Wanted to talk about the increasing pressures that companies face today to cut costs, with the advent of cloud computing, virtual working, ultimately leveling the playing field and making it easier for startups to compete with large companies. On one hand, you've got organizations automating a lot of their customer service, a lot of self-service online platforms, trying to cut those costs. I mean, oftentimes offshoring customer service. But how important or difficult as well is it to get the balance right between, say, automating some of this stuff, but maintaining a human face?
It's probably the biggest challenge out there. And unfortunately, most companies steer towards simple cost mitigation. They're simply steering towards what's cheaper. And very often it's because they're not looking at both sides of the equation. In other words, let's simplify it, because we're not going to get into this in deep detail. But if you simplify it, you offshore your customer service, okay, and you send it out to somebody. And what happens is you're finding that, number one, just right off the top, it's less expensive because the man hours are less expensive.
Yeah.
Then number two, probably, you find people might be spending less time on the phone. What you're not looking at and listening to is the other side of that, the complaints that are coming out of the fact that people feel that they're not being understood, that there's different culture listening to them. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I'm on the phone. And by the way, this is not me having a racial issue, but I will say put someone that speaks English on the damn phone.
Yeah.
Because I'm speaking to somebody in India who has such a deep accent that I can't understand a word they're saying to me. And you know, it's incredibly frustrating. And I can tell you that I have said I will never work with this brand again.
Yeah.
Because I can't get serviced. I have changed vendors because of things like this. And I think what companies have to realize is they've got to look at both sides. And these days, there's no excuse not to be using listening software and to be hearing what people are saying about those experiences they're having, and not just measuring the customer service by how quickly you get somebody off the phone and what the overall cost is related to man hours.
Yeah, it seems it's very easy for executives to fall into the trap of focusing on some of those short-term metrics, bringing costs down, bringing down time people spend on the phone in customer service centers and the like, and feel like they've done a good job. But ultimately, the long-term impact of that is actually negative.
No, the same thing happens with manpower. I mean, now look at you go into stores and you can't find people to help you, whereas you walk into an Apple store.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's impossible not to find people to help.
There's more employees than there are customers.
No matter how busy the store is, there's always somebody to talk to. Now, they're not servicing you immediately. I've waited plenty of time in an Apple store, but I never have to worry about finding someone who can help me and have a conversation and point me in the right direction and make my experience better. And they understand what this does for their brand. I mean, they're just a perfect example of, and here's another company which only until recently, they first jumped onto Twitter recently, and they were using it for customer service. But one of the reasons they didn't jump into social early is they didn't have to build their own social presence. It was being done for them by all their happy customers.
Yeah.
And a big mistake I heard made was I hear people go, well, Apple isn't here. I said, yeah, Apple is on social media, but their brand is so strong they don't need to be there themselves, because all people are doing is saying great stuff.
Yeah.
And they're not even looking for, and once you're there, you have to be committed to giving the engagement. Another mistake companies make, and I know I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here, but another mistake making, and this is related to customer service, because what they do is they have a social presence, but then they don't staff it. And then they don't have time to answer questions. And there's become an expectation that if you're on social media, especially from a customer service standpoint, that you'll be there to answer questions and to engage people when they have questions.
Yeah, you're much better off not having a social presence than having one that isn't used.
Agree 100%.
Ted, can you tell us a little bit more about this concept of looking people in the eye digitally?
Absolutely. I think the last few decades of marketing tactics have made us lazy communicators. Most often, we don't even pay attention to who we're talking to other than via the data we collect. And even that's a maybe. Very often that data is collected and not even really looked at. And in order to fix this and really start to benefit from all these social relationships, both as individuals and as companies, we need to start doing what I call looking people in the eye digitally. And what that means is knowing who they are, understanding what they're doing. I'm sure everybody in your audience, everyone who listens to your podcast, everyone at some point or another in their life, they were sat down by their mother and father and probably their first boss, but first mom and dad, who said, when you're talking to somebody's son or daughter, make sure you're looking at them.
Yeah.
Okay? When you went on your first date, I'll bet you anything, if it wasn't your dad, it was your mom who said, listen, make sure, Steve, that you look at her when you talk to her. And don't look at every other girl that walks in the room. Pay attention to who you're with.
That's right.
And, when you went on your first job interview, your dad said, make sure you look him in the eye. Show him that you mean it. Shake his hand and look at him. And we were all taught these things. But what's happened is we've lost these skills digitally because we don't really know how to do it. We think that we click a button and we make a friend. But that button click is like a handshake. And the first look in the eye, it's not a friendship. It's the opportunity to build a friendship. And the way you do that is you get to know who people are. And there's really no excuse anymore because all this information is available digitally. Everybody we're talking to, you can go to LinkedIn, you can go to Facebook, you can run a Google search and know something about them. And at the very least, you know their name. So if you follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, almost anywhere, you'll notice that when I reply to people, I call them by name. I don't just say, thanks for the retweet. I say, thanks for the retweet, Steve. Yeah. I don't just answer you. I answer you and I say, hey, Steve, that's a great idea. And why do I do that? I do that because the guy who wrote the best social media book ever written, taught me to do that.
Seth Godin?
Not even close. Okay? It's nobody that you're going to imagine. The book was written in 1936.
Okay.
And it's the best social media book ever written, and everybody in your audience should make sure to have one. I have a copy on my iPhone, on my iPad, on my laptop, and on my coffee table.
Can I have one more guest, Ted?
Absolutely.
Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People?
You got it.
Awesome.
That is the book. And what's really remarkable about that book is it was written in 1936, but in my opinion, it's more relevant today than it was when it was written. Because when it was written, the most people you could possibly meet in your lifetime was 100, maybe 200. Now you're meeting 100 people a minute, 100 people a second. And the tools that Dale Carnegie gives you in that book, and the one I was referring to now, is calling people by name. Dale Carnegie likes to say, or has always said, that there's no word in any language that's sweeter to the ears of the person you're talking to than the sound of their own name.
Yeah.
Everybody likes to hear. It's why so many people go out of their way to correct you when you call them the wrong name.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, think about that. I've gotten beyond that, probably because I'm so old. Now I just want you to call me. I don't care if you call me buddy. You can call me Tom. You can call me any variation of my name. When I was younger, and I'm sure you went through this, you didn't want someone calling you Stevie or Steven. Call me Steve. When I was a kid, don't call me Theodore. Don't call me Teddy unless you were my wrestling coach. Call me Ted. Now I don't care what you call me, but people will correct you all the time. I mean, even when you make a typo, they'll go, "Oh, my name's Ted, not Tom." And you go, "I know that, but that's because it's very important to people." So when you're on social media, make an effort, and not just the kind of social you're thinking about. I consider email social media. I consider text social media. So even when I'm texting someone, and by the way, this is work. This stuff isn't easy. It takes time. But I will add in that person's name in the text. I will add in that person's name not when I'm going back and forth, with 20 texts. But the first time you reach out to me, I'll reply back and go, "Hey Steve, how you doing?" I won't just say how you doing.
Yeah.
And when I write you an email, I'll do the same thing, or I'll close it with, "Thanks so much, Steve." And it takes me an extra moment. And by the way, it doesn't always come naturally. I have to hesitate and think about it. But when you make that difference, people notice it.
Yeah, definitely. And there are these subtle nuances that people do notice. I mean, we had a conversation last week in the office about people who send emails and don't say anything like, "Hi, Steve," or anything up the top, and just get right down into business. And it seems very impersonal in a way. And I think what you're alluding to when people call you by first name is especially more powerful when you're not expecting it. For example, it's someone you've maybe met once or twice, and then you haven't seen them for a few months, and they're like, "Hey, Ted." And you don't expect that, and it just makes you feel that a little bit better deep down inside. It's an interesting thing.
Steve, that's a really good point, because what I love to do is I love when there's somebody on Twitter or another social platform, especially Twitter, where they don't have their name. They're like, a web guy or something. That number one is sometimes you click on just their bio, it'll have their name in there. Sometimes it's not even there, which I think is foolish, because you're making it harder for people to personalize. But there'll be a link into their website. I will go so deep that I will find their name and I will reply back to them with their name. And one of two things happens. Either they go, "Wow, this guy went to a real effort to find out what my name was," or they'll kind of get all good, feeling good about themselves and going, "Hey, he knows who I am." And either way, you're making them feel good. And just like you were just talking about, it really makes a difference, because you went to that extra effort to remember their name or to find out what it was, and to call them by it. So, let's take these things a little bit further. When you talk about looking people in the eye digitally, it's about getting on a call and checking their social platform before you do that, or finding out some place they might have worked at or something they did. Look, let me just tell you a little story, and I'm sure a lot of people in the audience have gone through these kind of things. Sure. But I graduated college in 1980, and my dad, of course, was a mentor of mine and tried to help me with a lot of things. And he was in sales, and I went into sales. So my first week of my job, I get a call from my dad. Yeah, actually, we used the telephone back then. Yeah. And he said, "When is your first meeting?" Because he knew I was setting appointments. And I said, "Friday." And he said, "What time is the appointment?" I said, 10 o'clock. He said, "What time are you going to get there?" I said, 5 to 10. He goes, "No, you're going to get there at 9 o'clock." And you're going to walk around the neighborhood and you're going to see what restaurants are there, what businesses are there, what this person might see when they're outside their office. Then you're going to go into the building, look at what other companies are in the building, go to the guy's office or the woman's office and see if you can possibly get his or her assistant or secretary to let you into their office and see what pictures are on the wall. See if are they a golfer, are they a skier, are they a father, are they a grandfather. Find points of emotional connection. Find things that are important about them that you can talk to them about so that they warm up to you and they feel comfortable with you. But now we have all these tools that are accessed that there's no excuse to ever walk into an office without showing up that hour early digitally and finding out those things that you can relate to. I mean, honestly, please don't take this personally, but before we had this call, I knew you were from Australia, but Australia is Australia. And I was like, oh man, is he from Melbourne or Sydney? And I knew it was, but I went and checked because I certainly didn't want to say, so how's the weather in Sydney? And then you'd say, I'm from Melbourne.
Exactly.
And probably I should have looked a little deeper to know that it's Melbourne, not Melbourne, because I'm an American, so I say Melbourne.
This is true. But it's funny. I mean, when we started,
these are things that all of us have the opportunity to do. And by the way, and this is really important, so I hope everybody's listening closely, especially if they work for big companies. This is not just about you and me doing personally. This is about companies understanding. Every time I speak, one of my slides is just a slide with a fly.
Right.
Now, what it really is, it's the proverbial fly on the wall. And I'm sure you know that expression. Yes. I wish I could be a fly on the wall in that meeting. And of course, what that means is I wish I could hear what my prospects, what my customers are saying when I'm not there. Guess what? You can all hear what they're saying now because they're all putting it on social media. But the vast majority of these people, of you people out there, you're not listening. I speak to groups of thousands of people. They're all brands out in an audience. I mean, and every week I am out somewhere, especially with brand innovators, talking to a room full of marketers. And whenever I say, how many of you, either yourself or somebody in your team, is required to go to the Twitter feeds, not watch them when they come to yours, but go to their Facebook pages, their Instagram pages, their Twitter feeds, and come back and report about what they're talking about. And I don't mean using listening software. Nothing wrong with listening software, but all listening software does is give you trends, is you can search a word, but you don't actually hear the conversation.
That's right.
Go there. Have people in your employ go listen, and then make it their job to come back every day, every week, some point, but consistently with an insight about the conversations that are being had about your industry, your brand, or just by those people about things they like. Oh my God, you know what I just found out? All of our followers like to go to Hawaii. Now, that's an insight that no matter what you're doing, that's an insight that you can use to guide things. Because guess what? Maybe if you start putting pictures of Hawaii up on your site, people might start coming more often. Again, I'm giving you something very random, but you'd be surprised. I ran the social media. I helped build the social media for a company called Duane Reade Drugstores in New York. They're in the New York tri-state area. They only had 256 stores. They're now owned by Walgreens, which is the largest of their kind in the world. They have over 9,000 stores or over 8,000 stores. When I started working with them, they had 400 Twitter followers at this 256 store chain. By the time we finished, I was with Collective Bias, they had 2.5 million. They were the most widely followed retailer on the planet. And guess what? You know how we did it? We started putting out random photos, different things that were built like where it was a New York-based brand. So we started putting out pictures of the New York skyline, and guess what? People loved it, started sending us their pictures. Next thing you know, they're coming back every day. And guess what's happening? They're seeing the name of our company. This is no different than buying a big billboard over Times Square or in Yankee Stadium. And millions and millions and millions of dollars are spent on that. But no one can click on that and buy.
That's right. No one can share the billboard.
Right. So we were giving them a reason to come to our site. And guess what? When they came to our social site, they also saw that there might have been a sale that week, that we were offering a new type of pantyhose. Yes, pantyhose is sold at these stores. And Duane Reade, along with Twitter, did case studies of the way they drove sales through these interactions. So understand that getting to the heart of people with something that's important to them. I mean, this is old school branding. What the problem is, everybody thinks on social media, oh, that's not what you should be doing. We have to just be directing them towards our products because they think of it as digital.
Yeah.
But understand something, social is really not digital. It's personal. It's emotional.
That's right.
And this is what a lot of brands are missing.
And I think you're exactly right. I mean, you mentioned that there are absolutely no excuses in this digital age to, get to that office space 1 hour early, so to speak. I wanted to find out a little bit more about you above and beyond, the books you've done, the keynotes you've delivered and all that sort of stuff. And it literally took me maybe 3 minutes to figure out, hey, this guy's New York native. He's into water skiing. He's into skiing. He enjoys spin biking and all this sort of stuff. And, there are absolutely...
Wow, you really did do your research.
Yeah, look, there's absolutely no excuses in this day and age when information is just so readily accessible and at our fingertips.
And I love that, that you co-founded a company called Collective Campus because the company that I helped build was called Collective Bias.
Yeah, I did notice that when I was doing my research. I thought about putting out into the conversation today, but you did it for me, so thank you.
but exactly. But look how easy it was. I mean, and truth be told, I haven't posted about water skiing or spin bike in a long time, which means that it didn't take a lot of work for you to find out about things that I haven't even mentioned lately, with just a little bit of digging.
That's exactly right. And I think that's a good segue into the age of influence. Do you want to tell our listeners what you mean by this age of influence that we're living in today?
Well, what I like to say is, welcome to the age of influence where anyone can build an audience and affect change, advocate brands, build relationships, and make a difference 24/7.
Yeah.
Without ever leaving their bedrooms.
Exactly.
Now, I'm not advising people here to never leave their bedrooms, but the point I'm making is there was a time where when you wanted to build your influence, when you wanted to build your network, when you wanted to build communities, you had to, have a budget for it. You had to be able to travel to go to meetups or travel to go to commerce events or things happening in the city, and sometimes you have to pay fees and join a club. Now, you can do it anytime, anywhere.
Yeah.
There are Twitter chats, there are LinkedIn groups, there are Facebook groups, and amazing walks of life. I mean, I know a couple of guys in the social media space that are speaking every month and getting paid for it, and they built all of this by attending Twitter chats.
Yeah.
Which are based around a hashtag. I mean, anybody can research those things. If I hear people all the time saying, I joined Twitter, but I don't have a lot of followers. So start going to places, and by the way, these places are virtual, Twitter chats, things happening on Twitter, and start engaging in conversations. And people will find you and recognize you. And there's a lot more mechanical ways to do this, and we're not having this talk about that. But the point being, first of all, it's the good side. The good side is that you, Steve, and I, and everybody in this audience can build their own brand and can affect change and do things for brands and build their own company. The tough part, and what I tell big companies all the time, is you better realize that your competition isn't just the people that you're listing on a page that you know of. Your competition is potentially everybody. Because as we've seen, anybody can become an overnight sensation. Now, by the way, overnight doesn't mean it really happened overnight. No. But what it means is that I don't need a multi-million-dollar budget to get people to know who I am and start listening to what I say. There are Snapchat influencers. And so how long has Snapchat even been around?
Exactly.
For someone to have become an influencer on Snapchat, on Vine, on Instagram. There are kids who are 16 years old that are making six figures.
Yeah.
Sharing content on Instagram. And my guess is, as recently as a year or two, nobody knew who they were. So the point being, anybody can do it. It is the great equalizer. But what it really is an opportunity. And by the way, it's not just a warning for major brands. It's an opportunity because the bigger the brand, the more employees they have. Yeah. The more opportunity they have to empower their employees to power their brand and to help their employees become experts, become influencers, grow their social presence. Because if you're a brand that has 10,000 employees and your average employee has 100 followers on social media, imagine that same company with the average employee having 10,000 followers on social media, and the brand voice they can have by empowering them to share content, communicate with customers, and help them build their brand.
Yeah, I mean, and just on that, I mean, it's crazy that many organizations still block access to social media through the company internet.
It's absolutely, and it was funny because one of my closest friends is very old school, and he saw me post something. I don't know if you saw my post that said "It's not okay." That I posted to Facebook just yesterday.
Yeah.
And this is something I've posted before, and to me, it's at the heart of what's happening here on social media, and that so many people just don't understand. And a buddy of mine who didn't want to comment on the post because he thought it would bother me, which, by the way, it wouldn't. To me, it's just conversation. But just so your audience is aware, because it's a very short post, I wrote in capital letters, "It's not okay." And then I went on to say, "It's not okay to just use social channels to just broadcast. It's not okay to simply advertise and call it social media. It's not okay to block employees from accessing social media sites while at work. It's not okay to discourage employees from building their own personal brands. It's not okay to allow PR agencies to be your social voice without regular input from company employees. It's not okay to let interns set your social media strategy. And most importantly, it's not okay for the CEOs and CMOs to make social media decisions without any knowledge of what it's about." And my buddy is an old school guy. He's like, "Well, and I don't allow my employees to use social media. Well, maybe I should just let them read books all day long." And first of all, this guy runs a company with a lot of forklift operators, and he's telling me I can't let my forklift operators use their phones when they're on there. I'm like, of course you can't. Now you're being a little ridiculous because you're taking this a little. I'm not meaning that a guy driving your tractor trailers should be allowed to be on his cell phone, communicating with people.
Of course not.
Obviously, it doesn't make sense. But he went on to say to me, I only let my office workers access these things because I don't want to hear the complaints. I'm like, well, there's a lot more reason for this. First of all, if you stop them from doing it, they're going to do it anyway on their devices. And then you're forcing them to cheat. And what you're doing is you're turning your workforce into a bunch of cheaters, into a bunch of people that are, and by the way, it takes more time to look under your desk or hide in the corner or go extra times to the bathroom to check your social than it does to be allowed to do it right from your desk. Number two is most conversations and most breaking news is happening on social media these days. So now you're blocking them from general information and knowledge about your client base. Now, again, I'm not talking about letting the guy who's flipping burgers, who's going to now burn himself. Let's use some common sense, but I'm talking about especially your executive workforce. I mean, there are companies there that are even blocking their executive workforce from using these tools. And to me, that's just absolutely ridiculous. What you're doing is, first of all, it's like sticking your finger in the dam. It's not going to keep up. And second of all, if you don't trust your employees, then my opinion is you have the wrong employees and you're not training them properly.
That's exactly right. And I think empowerment and giving people employees is definitely the way forward when it comes to keeping them engaged and productive. And on the edge of influence, there are no excuses. It's never been cheaper than ever to there's nothing to stop people from going out there, starting a podcast, start writing blogs, getting onto socials, sending emails to influencers and trying to connect with them. I mean, ultimately, the way I connected with you, Ted, our podcast is literally little more than 2 months old, and we already hit the #1 slot in the business news chart here in Asia Pac for iTunes. And it was purely, yes, not necessarily an overnight success. As you alluded to, overnight successes are rarely that, and we had a large corporate database to start promoting our podcast to. But ultimately, there was nothing to stop me from going out and saying, hey, I want to speak to Ted Rubin. I think he'd be a great guest on our show. And it starts with mindset. And appreciating, mindset underpins everything, and appreciating the opportunities that are out there, and that the playing field is more level than it's ever been.
I agree with that 100%, Steve. I like to say that it starts with attitude, perspective, which leads to that foundation of mindset, like you're talking about. And mindset is making up your mind what's important to you, and what you're going to do and where you're going to go. And it certainly, you need some self-awareness, which means your expectations have to be in line with what is possible. That doesn't mean that it's going to happen, but that you have that potential. And look what you've accomplished. And like you said, it really didn't happen in 2 months. It happened in all that time it took you to get to that start. 2 months ago. All the relationship building you did, the list building you did, the reputation building you did, because like I like to say, a brand or a business is what you do, a reputation is what people remember and share. And a lot of that stuff is hard work, and it comes over time. And you built that foundation, and then you launched this podcast. And like you said, you can reach out. The beauty of social is that you can reach out and find anybody. It's why I laugh when I'm at an event and I ask a senior executive or somebody for their card. And, some people actually don't carry cards. I think that's a mistake. I think they're a relationship builder. I think when you hand someone a card, it's the opening and starting of a relationship. But more importantly, there are those guys who don't give you a card because they don't want you to connect with them. Do you really believe there's anybody in this world whose connection information I can't find? I mean, especially a senior executive of a major company. How hard is that? I mean, it's amazing when they don't give it to me, and I know why they're not giving it to me, because they're worried, first of all, that I'm like everybody else, that all I'm going to do is send them a sales pitch, that I'm not going to look to build a relationship first. But to me, it's just scary that they don't think that if I really wanted to do that I can't just get there. And I'm going to give your audience a tip, a new site I found, which is pretty cool. It's called Rocket Reach.
Right.
ROCKETREACH, and you put anybody's name in there, and it will get you their email.
Wow.
It's awesome.
Sounds very awesome. Just on the topic of tools, do you have any other tools that you recommend our audience use in order to, craft their return on relationship?
Well, I'll tell you that I'm not a big technology tool guy, and most of these things I don't even know the half about what you can do with them. But I personally like Hootsuite to manage a lot of different Twitter handles. Other people like other ones. I used to use TweetDeck. I loved TweetDeck, but I moved away from it to Hootsuite, and I'm a creature of habit, so once I get into using something, I tend to stick with it, but I really like it. I don't use this much for my primary Twitter handle, but Buffer is a great tool if you're working with brands that need to schedule tweets. I mean, you can do that on Hootsuite also, but Buffer is a great thing. And then there is it's funny, I have someone on my team, one of my interns that uses it, so I don't remember the name. But I used to use something called Just Unfollow on Twitter. But if you go to tedrubin.com and you put in the search bar Twitter basics, your audience will find a post I wrote. Make sure you go to the one that's updated. There's two of them. There's the original one I wrote, and then there's one that's called Updated. So Updated Twitter Basics, or just look up Twitter Basics and look at the updated one, and it'll give you some of the tools we use to follow people back, to unearth people that you want to follow, and things like that. I don't automate. Nothing's automated. I do it all by search, but it gives you a tool that makes it easier to follow back those people and do those kind of things. And then another thing I'll tell you, audience, is that I have a great basically one sheeter that's called the 12 most important ways to build return on relationship. And if they go to RORPRO.com, if you join my newsletter, you'll get that tool for free.
Great. I'm sure our audience would appreciate that.
It's really worthwhile. And by the way, I promise you, I do not sell out my list to anybody. I don't share names with anybody. What you'll get 99% of the time is I have 2 newsletters that go out. Every Sunday, one goes out with one of my latest blog posts. And then every Wednesday, it's called my Return on Relationship newsletter. And every week I feature somebody else's post, never my own. So another tip, by the way, is my email address is tedrubin@gmail.com. And if you know someone that has a great blog and has great posts and you want me to share their content, feel free to email me and recommend it to me. And by the way, it's okay if it's your own you're recommending. I'm okay with that as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Ted. We might wrap up with 3 questions, 2 hypotheticals and 1 on lifestyle design. It's a bit I literally started doing today with my previous 2 interviews this morning. Let's do it. They are totally unrehearsed. So question number 1, if you could work for any company at any stage of their life cycle, who would it be and why?
It can only be one? Okay, well, if I could work for any person, it would be Jeff Bezos. Now, I am the reason I'm saying work for him is because Amazon is a very difficult company to work for.
Right.
And I'm not sure I'd want to be in their culture, but I would love to have been around or be around Jeff Bezos personally. I was very fortunate. I had the opportunity to work with Seth Godin, and it helped change my life. So I'm going to answer you two things. I'd say if it was a person, it was Jeff Bezos. If it was company, it would have been earlier stages of Google.
Excellent. That's the second person today to say the earlier stages of Google. Interesting. Question number 2. If you could ask anybody dead or alive a question, who would it be and what would you ask?
Any person dead or alive?
Tough one.
Oh boy, there's so many people. It's hard to just pick one.
Pick the first one that comes to your head.
The first one that comes to my head would be Dale Carnegie. You know, I've read about his life and his things, and the question I'd like to ask him is what inspired him the most.
Wow, that's awesome. That's great. Especially in that time when people weren't, thinking that particular way. It was more so just about, going to work. I think 80% of the American population at the time were, farmers, and this whole concept of self-improvement, self-empowerment, asking questions that weren't being asked really just wasn't something that was being done.
Exactly.
And finally, I like to get inside the heads of high performers, and I'm keen to find out how you stay on top of your game.
For me, what's really focused me is understanding the value of the connection that I had to rebuild with my daughters. I had to fight to keep my daughters in my life. If you researched me, right, yes. You probably found that out. You might not have brought it up because you might have thought maybe it was a sensitive subject, but it's something I weave into everything I do. And what I learned the most from them was how moments are more important than milestones, and how we have to find those moments and then save those moments and use them and use that information appropriately. So I'm very attuned to finding when those moments are happening, whether it's a conversation with you, Steve, or it's somebody that I'm meeting on the street, or it's something I see posted, and recognizing the fact that this can be a game changer for me in the way I perceive things. And the other thing is learning that it's a lot easier and nicer to be happy than to be angry.
Yeah.
My major goal for the rest of my life is to make every attempt to default to happy, instead of everything else that adults default to, which is stressed, angry, emotional, nervous. I want to be more like a kid. I want to have a creative mindset that works, and I want to default to happy.
Oh, that's great. And thanks for opening up and sharing that with our audience. And I think, the whole defaulting to happy, we always have a choice, and you've mentioned How to Win Friends and Influence People a couple of times. One of the other books, Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I read that at quite a young age, and just the whole concept of being proactive and being response-able. Any external stimuli that comes in your way, you have a choice if you want to respond in anger, jealousy, greed, or be happy. And I think you
can always affect the way you can't control the way what other people do.
That's right.
But you can always control the way you react to it.
Exactly. Couldn't agree more. Finally, I understand that you're a big fan of Crazy Socks. Is this right?
That's true.
Fantastic. Well, you've actually inspired a special offer from some of my friends at Barnaby Shop, BARNABY shop.com. So our listeners can get 10% off their socks with the coupon code, you'll like this, Ted Loves Socks. And I'll try and do my best to send out a couple of pairs for you, Ted, as well.
Sounds good. I love that, Steve. Thanks so much. And for anybody that wants to see my socks, I use the hashtag TEDSOCKIE, TEDSOCKIE. If you go to Instagram and put that in the search, you'll get to see all what I wear and when I post them and who shares them with me and all that kind of stuff. So please feel free. And I really would like to leave your audience with one last thing about relationships. Just always remember that relationships are like muscle tissue. The more they're engaged, the stronger and more valuable they become.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for being with us, Ted. Cheers.
My pleasure.
Well, that's it for our podcast with Ted Rubin. Hope you enjoyed listening as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. Don't forget you can subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. And if you're liking what we're putting down, it would make my day if you spent literally 30 seconds to give us a glowing 5-star review on either platform. If you've got any questions about today's podcast, you can email me at steve@collectivecamp.us. And if you'd like to sign up to our mailing list, you can do that on futuresquared.xyz. Until next time, Future Squared out.